We always say that rest and joy are forms of resistance, but what if they're more than that? Like, what if joy and rest are architecture, the very foundation of what we build our futures on? Well, that's what this episode is all about. Not the aesthetics of joy, not the performance of wellness, but the bones of it, right? Joy, rest, healing, and even emotional sovereignty. These aren't the fringe benefits of freedom, they're the framework. They're what make liberation livable. And look, I know how easy it is to treat these things like luxuries. Like rest is for when you get the to do list done, right? Like joy is something that you have to earn, but that's just because we've been conditioned that way. And we've been conditioned to put these parts of ourselves on hold until the fight is over, until the work is done, and until the world feels less heavy, like less of our responsibility. But what if we stop postponing joy? What if we stop rationing our rest? And what if these were the starting point instead of the prize at the end? I'm your host, Kasheia, and this is the Futures in Black podcast. It's the night for Black thought, for radical vision, and future building without permission. Let's reimagine what's next together. This episode is an invitation to you to reframe, to remember, and maybe to even reclaim a few things you were told don't matter. When I started putting this episode together, I asked a couple of my friends on Facebook to tell me what rest and joy meant to them and what healing looks like for them in real life. And honestly, the answers really blew me away. And they reminded me about how much wisdom lives in our everyday lives, how much sacredness lives in our softness. So during the episode, you'll hear me kind of weave in some of those reflections because this is more than just theory. Rest as resistance is bigger than just theory. And it's about real people doing the real work to be well, to take care of themselves, to feel, to release, and to build something better. So, whether you are already deep into your rest journey, or even if you're still trying to convince yourself that joy is safe, you're in the right place. So, let's get into it. So, let's talk about this phrase that's in the title of this episode, future proofing joy. And I know it can sound like real technical, right? It sounds real cold, a little bit sterile. Like we're talking about code or climate change or something that needs to be insulated or protected against risk. And that's kind of wild because we're actually just talking about joy, something that should be easy, something warm, something human, and something that we deem sacred. And yet, the need to future proof our joy is very real because, as Black people in America, We've never really had the luxury of assuming joy will just be there. We've always had to fight for it, always had to protect it, and carve it out with our own hands. Rest, laughter, softness, those things have never been handed to us freely. They've had to be taken back in bits and pieces, in quiet moments and in our radical refusals. So, as much as we might just want to just have our joy, right? We just want to have it without all the weight, without needing to name it or justify it or defend it. The truth is, we can't really afford to take it for granted. We have too much to lose. So we have to build around it and we have to actively choose it on purpose. And that's what I mean when I say future proofing Black Joy. It's not about preserving something that's necessarily fragile, but it's more about making joy the foundation of what we do. It's about creating our lives and our communities where joy is from the start built into the structure, right? Where it's not just something that happens when we're lucky or when we're on vacation or when we're finally done grinding ourselves into the ground. It's something that we design for, that we plan around, something that holds us up when the pressure is on. Because if we're being honest, we have spent generations, and by we I mean Black people, being the labor behind somebody else's dream. We've spent generations fueling the joy and comfort of others while our own went neglected, to say the very least. And I think we need to flip the script. And it's time to take future building seriously, where our joy and our rest are the blueprint, not just the reward, but the design for what we build for ourselves. And I think this is especially real when we talk about liberation, because I think sometimes we act like joy and liberation are opposites of each other. Like, we fight first and then we rest. Or, we build first and then we celebrate. But that's a setup. And it's just burnout in disguise, just waiting to happen. The kind of visionary work that we're trying to do, the kind that creates real collective freedom, can't be powered by exhaustion. Joy has to be in it because joy sustains. Joy makes it worth it. Joy helps us see beyond the limits of our current conditions. And I remember, and I'm not a religious person, but I remember going to church and hearing about the difference between happiness and joy. Right? Happiness, I'll be happy because they got a sale on some shoes or something, right? But joy is deeper than that. Joy comes from those deeper parts of us when the world around us is crazy and against us. When I think about the work that I've done that I'm most proud of, I wasn't running on fumes. I was very well rested. I was excited and I believed in what I was creating. I was connected to people who inspired me. And that energy is what makes the future, to me, is what makes it feels possible. It's what makes it feel possible. So when we talk about building liberated futures, we have to bring that same energy. We can't build new worlds out of the same tools that broke us. We can't build futures worth living if we're emotionally bankrupt, spiritually depleted, and too tired to even dream. Joy is what helps us dream again. It pulls us forward and it feeds our imagination. And that imagination, especially Black imagination that we've talked about so much in just these 4 episodes, is one of our sharpest tools. And this is where the Afrofuturism piece speaks directly to this moment. That lens reminds us that emotion and imagination aren't distractions. They are a type of technology for us. They are the very infrastructure of the systems that we build within ourselves before we even reach the external ones. Joy allows us to imagine what we haven't yet experienced. It stretches our minds and it softens us, it softens our bodies, it creates a space for something new, something different. And that's the space where our new futures are born. So I want to be real clear when I say this, that joy is not a reward for freedom. It's the frequency of freedom. And that's why we have to future proof it. Because without it, the work just becomes another machine, another grind. And if we're really trying to build something better, something freer, then joy is not optional. It is absolutely essential. And when I put out the call for reflections on joy and rest, the responses that came in reminded me just how deep this goes. People talked about joy as a form of peace, rebellion, of remembrance, and how it shows up in our stillness, in our music, and in our connections to each other. And I'll share some of those reflections later in the episode. But right now, I just want to say that if you're listening to this and you're wondering whether your joy matters in the scheme of things, I'm here to tell you that it does, more than you even know. Joy is not a distraction. It's the direction, and we deserve to follow that direction. We deserve to move in the way of joy. Trisha Hersey, who is known as the Nap Bishop and is the founder of the Nap Ministry, says that rest is resistance. And there's something that we hear a lot, I think, in these last couple of years, and without really knowing where it comes from. But she's kind of the mind behind that framework of rest as resistance. And she also says that rest is reparations. That's kind of deep. But she didn't even stop there. She also said that rest is a birthright. It's a divine inheritance. It's not something you earn with your productivity points. And that shift is everything. Because when you start to see rest as not just a tool for better output, But when you see it as a fundamental human need and a sacred right, you treat it differently. You protect it, you center it, because it isn't just an optional luxury. It's not just about self care Sundays or spa days only when, your paycheck is good and everything else is taken care of. But rest is what allows us access to imagination. It's what allows us to remember ourselves. And it's the mental and emotional soil where all that visionary thinking, the dreaming we've talked about in past episodes, can actually happen. Capitalism and white supremacy, forever the archenemy of Futures in Black, they've spent generations stealing what Trisha Hersey calls our dream space. It's the quiet inside of us, the softness, that margin between ease and work, that internal sanctuary where we ideate and breathe and exist without an agenda attached. That is a site of theft. So reclaiming it, reclaiming that dream space is resistance as well. Imagine communities where rest is built into the rhythm of daily life, where taking a nap is seen as wise, not weak, where a long pause in the middle of the day isn't guilt inducing. You don't feel bad because you just want to rest, but it's expected, where rest matters more than meetings and more than metrics. And yet we've inherited this myth that exhaustion is a badge of honor. Y'all, it's not. We think that the more you grind, the more valuable you are, even though we, as Black folks, have already given more than anyone could ever repay for real. Building this country, literally raising other people's children, shaping entire creative industries with little credit or compensation. And yet we still get called lazy. It's the most disrespectful, delusionist lie that has ever been told. And some of us have internalized it to the point where we think 12-hour shifts and skip meals and no sleep means we are handling business. Baby, that ain't strength. That's you just surviving. That's survival mode. People love to talk about breaking generational curses. That they love to bring up slave mentality when they talk about our food and things like that. But overwork is a curse. It's a remnant of plantation logic, and it's a trauma response. And the only way out of it is to choose differently, even when it feels hard. So one of the respondents to the question I put out on Facebook about, personal joy and rest and what that means and looks like for individuals, Kawanda says something that really stuck with me. And I'll just read what she wrote. She wrote that sometimes simply unplugging from everything and everyone, I am intentional about my morning quiet time and workouts. That has helped me through my years in leadership and now being an entrepreneur. Intentional. That word really hit me. She didn't say she squeezes in rest where she can. She says she plans for it. She honors it. That's not indulgence or luxury, it's wisdom in action. And that's what gives her life structure and helps her become the leader that she is, and helps her be the leader that she is. And it really made me reflect on how I'm still learning this too. I've had to unlearn the idea that I needed to earn every breath of exhale I took. I'm still figuring out how to rest without guilt, but some days that just looks like taking a nap right after work instead of powering through and cleaning up and cooking, right? Or just giving myself permission to, I bought a coloring book and some color pencils, right? Or, I've got a bunch of books from the library that I'm reading through. Those are, my practice right now. But sometimes it's just doing nothing. I do nothing. And that's my resistance, right? That's my form of joy and rest as resistance. And it's not something that has to be overcomplicated. And that's where the intentionality comes in, because rest won't happen on its own. Well, I take that back. If you don't rest and if you don't give yourself a moment to breathe and take care of yourself, sometimes your body will force you to rest. But we don't want it to come to that. We can claim it now. And claiming it is a powerful declaration. My body is not an engine, and my worth is not in my output. Right? We don't have to burn out to prove that we are worthy. All we have to do is fully live, and rest helps us do that. So let's talk about healing as a form of liberation, because I think that healing is also associated with joy, right? If you're unhealed, it's very hard to feel healed, or very hard to feel joy, should I say, if you are unhealed, or if, most of you is unhealed. It's very hard to find that place of joy. So healing is not just some cute self-care buzzword, but it truly is the foundation of freedom and of liberation. Real healing, the kind that shifts timelines and that rewrites our stories, it's sacred and it's messy and it's necessary. Trauma doesn't just live in our minds, it lives in our bodies. I hear a lot about how the body keeps the score, and it lives in the choices that we make. And it passes through families, through generations, encoded in silence, encoded in survival tactics and unspoken expectations. We've talked before on Futures in Black about epigenetics, and it's starting to give us the language for that generational trauma that we've all noticed in our own families. And it's the science that is catching up to what we've always known in our bones. When something traumatic happens and you don't have the tools or the time or space to process it, your body stores it. Your nervous system adjusts, you adapt, you push through, and that adaptation gets passed down until somebody, maybe you, starts the work of unlearning that trauma response. And let me be real, unlearning is hard to do. Healing takes time, and sometimes the first step towards healing is just believing that it's possible. believing that joy belongs to you, that it's your birthright, and that your story can change, and that the cycle can end with you. Healing is a form of time travel. It's like walking back through those old rooms in your spirit, the ones that you locked in years ago, and opening the windows, letting in fresh air, letting light in, letting yourself breathe. It's going back and telling the younger version of you, you made it. And then designing a future where that version of you feels safe. But I'm not going to romanticize it for you. Healing very often feels like grief. It feels like solitude. It feels like peeling away the layers that kept you functioning, even when they were hurting you. Sometimes it means letting go of people you love. Sometimes it means confronting parts of yourself you wish weren't even there. And yeah, that kind of honesty with yourself, it can hurt, it can sting. It can leave you feeling raw. But believe it or not, the grief is part of it. Pain is part of it. And you can honor those things without letting them stop you. I personally know firsthand just how heavy this kind of work can be. I know what it feels like to be in the thick of it and to feel like everything around you is unraveling. Your safety net is unraveling. And I also know that that unraveling is not the end. It's just the beginning. Because when you pull up the roots of your trauma, when you make space to plant something new, and when enough of us do that work, not just for ourselves, but with each other, that's when healing becomes liberation. That's when it becomes a collective experience of healing. And a collectively healed people, baby, that's a force, okay? That's a future that cannot be colonized. It cannot be fucked with. Another respondent, Sharon, shared this reflection, and it really hit me deep. She says, I spiraled into a deeper depression. What I understand now is that I was in the thick of my healing journey. Prayer, conversations, random moments shifted my entire perspective. And in her original response, she talks about how, she hates to use the word healing journey, because it's so overused and watered down and on social media. But she had to call it what it was because that's what it is. It's healing, and it definitely is a journey. But Sharon put language to something that so many of us go through silently. That moment when the breaking is actually the breakthrough, when everything feels like it's falling apart, but really it's the old self being shed away. Even when we hate the word healing, even when it feels impossible, it's messy, but it is sacred. And Sharon also said this. She said, I now know I will forever be a student and a steward of me. That sense of urgency I used to have can now be soothed by me. And damn, that line stuck with me, like a student and a steward of me, of myself. Because when you reclaim your healing, you also reclaim your time and your pace and your peace. And that kind of peace is literally revolutionary. So if you're in your own healing journey right now, and maybe you're feeling that grief when it's quiet, and maybe the unlearning is hard to do, just know that it's not a setback, I promise. It's not weakness. It's the work that you have to do, and I promise you that that work is worthy. Your joy, your happiness, your rest, they're not just leftovers from someone else's liberation. They're part of your new story. And it's a story that you get to write on your own terms. We heal so that we can imagine. We heal so we can connect. We heal so we can build. And that's what makes healing not just personal, but political. Beyond survival, it is strategy. So let's talk about another word that you may or may not, or another term I should say, that you may or may not have considered, but let's talk about emotional sovereignty. And when I hear that term, to me it means it's it's the right to feel what you feel, and without apology, without explaining it, and without someone else needing to co-sign your experience before you honor it. And woo, listen, that's a big one, because Lord knows Black folks are still learning how to give ourselves permission to feel. We've tied our emotional expression to everything from gender to income to who's watching us. We've trained ourselves to hold back tears so we don't seem weak, to mute our joy so we don't seem unserious, or to pretend like we're not bothered so we don't make others uncomfortable. And it's exhausting, and it keeps us from the full experience of our own humanity. Our ancestors fought tooth and nail to be seen as human, to be recognized as full, feeling beings. And here we are, generations later, still silencing ourselves in rooms we were born to walk through freely. And listen, I'm not talking down to anybody. I'm preaching to the same choir I sing in. Emotion has never really been easy for me either. But the thing is that you're going to feel it regardless. So pushing it down doesn't cancel the emotion, it just changes how it shows up. It sneaks into your body, into your relationships, your choices, it festers. Suppressing your tears doesn't make you strong, it just makes you heavier. Walking around with a scowl because you're scared a smile might make someone assume something about your sexuality. That ain't protection, that's straight pain. And we gotta let it go. Audre Lorde told us that our silence will not protect us. Adrienne Marie Brown reminds us that pleasure is a form of knowing. And Octavia Butler built entire futuristic worlds out of emotion and adaptation. These women understood what many of us are still wrestling with, that our emotions are data. They are tools. They help us design better lives and make better choices, create more liberating futures. How do you know a job is breaking you down? Because you can feel it. How do you know a relationship is draining your spirit? Because you feel it. How do you know when you're aligned? You feel that too. Emotion is not weakness, it's wisdom and foresight. That's why I say emotional sovereignty is about not waiting for the world to validate your feelings before you act on what you know. Your feelings aren't liabilities, they are guides. Because we are not machines. We are flesh and feeling. We are complex, soft, passionate, frustrated, joyful, hurting, hoping beings. Our ancestors were not livestock, no matter what the traffickers and colonizers tried to claim. Our ancestors cried, they loved, they laughed, they grieved, they dreamed. They had whole emotional lives that were never acknowledged. And so now we are challenged to fight, not to repeat that erasure in our own lives. Because emotional sovereignty isn't just about today, it's about what we pass down. It's about raising kids who can name their feelings without shame. It's about building families and communities where softness is safety. Imagine this with me. A future where every child learns how to regulate their nervous system before they ever take a standardized test, where emotional fluency is a graduation requirement, where softness is not just allowed, but it's expected, it's respected. That's the world I want to help build. One where being a whole person isn't an act of defiance, it's just the norm. So yeah, emotional sovereignty, it belongs in the blueprint. It belongs in the infrastructure of our Black futures. Because there's no future worth building that doesn't make room for us to feel all of who we are and to be loved in the process. So, what do we do with all this? All this joy, rest, healing, emotional sovereignty. These are not just concepts. These are everyday practices, real life tools, and our ways of living. And we got to start with it somewhere. So let's break it down with a few simple steps. Nothing fancy, just some ways to start building this work into your actual life. So the first thing is to schedule rest like a meeting, like literally put it on your calendar. Block it off the same way you would a Zoom call or a dentist appointment. And then don't just schedule it, actually honor it. When that time comes up, take that moment of rest. Don't cancel on yourself to be more available to other people's needs. If you wouldn't flake on your boss, why would you flake on your own body? Number 2 is to create a joy audit once a day. Just one moment. Ask yourself, what brought me joy today? I remember there was a show on Netflix. It was some lady that organized, and she used to say, "Does this spark joy?" That's how we made the determination about. That's how we would make or should make the determination about what to throw away or to keep. And this is similar. Like, just take a moment and think about something, just even something small that brought you joy, and then write it down or put it in a voice note, text it to a friend. It doesn't matter, just express it. What matters is that you name it. Some days it'll be something big, and some days it might be something small, like my coffee was perfect today, but that still counts, and you deserve to notice your joy. Number 3 is to say no more often, not just to tasks, but to urgency. You don't have to answer every message in 30 seconds. You don't have to show up to everything. You don't have to earn your worth through responsiveness. You are allowed to decline the pace of capitalism. Say no so that your yeses stay meaningful. And number 4, make healing visible and joyful. We don't always have to heal in silence. Sometimes healing is just dancing in your living room, journaling under the moonlight, or singing badly in the shower, laying in bed doing absolutely nothing, what they call that, bed rotting, and not feeling guilty about it. Make healing beautiful for you. Make it loud and make it yours. This isn't just about making space for joy. It's about making joy the very soil that you grow from. Everything else, work, movement, strategy, should grow from a place of joy. It should be the foundation, and let rest be the infrastructure. Let healing be your ritual, and your emotions, they should be sacred, enough to keep and enough to honor and to name. Because the future we're building it starts with how we treat ourselves right now. So we've reached the end of today's episode, and I hope something in today's episode opened something soft in you. And yes, men, I'm talking to you too. I'm talking to everybody Black. I hope it opens something honest, something that reminds you that joy is not a luxury, that rest is not a reward, and that healing is not a side project. And your emotions are not a liability. All those things are yours, they belong to you. And this future that we keep talking about, the one we're trying to create, to build, it won't be real if it doesn't make room for all of that, for the full versions of all of us. The softness, the slowness, the full range of who we are when we're not just grinding to exist. Future-proofing Black Joy means we don't just protect it, we prioritize it. We weave it into the structure of our lives so that when the world gets loud, when the systems we're trapped in try to squeeze the humanity out of us, we still have something sacred to hold on to. Your joy is sacred. Your rest is righteous. Your healing is a holy thing. And your emotions are data. This episode wasn't just a vibe check. I hope it ignited vision in you. So, like always, I want to hear from you. What does future-proofing joy look like in your own life? What's one thing that brings you rest or helps you feel whole or reminds you that you're allowed to feel? Send me a message. You can visit, of course, www.futuresinblack.com. If you want to ask a question or leave a comment or, say anything, you can go to futuresinblack.com/ask and, leave something, comment on the episode, share this with someone who needs to hear about joy and healing. Let's make this a bigger conversation, not just me speaking into the void. Because the more we say these things out loud, the more real they become. Future-proofing Black Joy is about making sure we don't just survive the future, but that we shape it with joy stitched into every step. And that starts today with a choice to honor what we feel and with the courage to be well. This has been Futures in Black. Bold visions, Black voices, no permission needed.